power on.
Hey, if you have a project that needs reliable cryptocurrency data, check out blocktap.io. Blocktap.io is a universal cryptocurrency API. You can get historical prices for Bitcoin and other digital assets that you can use to build charts and do market analysis. Blockchain data is also indexed, so you can get transaction statistics, address balances, and more for Bitcoin and other networks. Blocktap.io is free for personal use, and you don't even need to create an account to access the API. To get started, try some of the example queries on the homepage at blocktap.io. Again, that's blocktap.io, blocktap.io, and we thank them for sponsoring Sovryn Tech. Woo, let's get back to the show.
Accessing historical database. Year 2020. The tech giants become aware of the greatest threat to their corporatist domination. An obscure science and tech podcast becomes a major factor in a peaceful open source revolt against the military Silicon Valley industrial complex. The podcast, Sovryn Tech. Its host, Dr. Brian Sovryn. The tech giants tried to stop Sovryn Tech. They can't.
Stop making Batman movies, for fuck's sake. Okay, sorry, we're going to get into some tech news. But for the love of shit, I can't do this anymore. No, I mean, I can do the show fine. That's no problem. I love doing the show. I had a few people email me, say, Stallion, why aren't you doing the climax so much anymore? And I'm like, what, do you just want me to complain all the time? I don't care how good Robert Pattinson looks in a fucking Batman outfit, and that's arguable. I don't care what the Batmobile looks like. I don't give a rat's ass about anything. I mean, Robert Pattinson, we already knew he sucked, and not just because he was in a vampire movie, but shh. Stop. Just stop. The Christopher Nolan trilogy wasn't good enough for you? Batman v Superman wasn't bad enough for you? Wow. Man, I mean, it's just the franchise fatigue. I don't know. There's something weird going on here, and to say nothing of something we mentioned last week, actually, when we were talking about, we had our little COVID-19 special, with what happened with Bob Iger. I don't know. Shit's weird out there. That's the bottom line. In the entertainment industry, I mean, great. There's a few little movies coming out here and there, and horror's doing great. Okay, fine. But the superheroes genre, science fiction, fuck it. Anyway, I mean, other than Fast 9, I'm there for that. Anyway, you're not here to listen to me talk about movies. Actually, I know a lot of you are. You love it when I do. But I can't do this anymore. There's no point to me talking about the entertainment industry. I could talk about the classic stuff, I guess, all day long. In fact, got my hands on recently. This is a pre-order from someone's back. Arrow Films, they've been putting out these tremendous. In fact, eventually I'm sure they're going to be 4K releases because they do Blu-ray releases based upon 4K restorations of some of these classic films. But I got the movie Ronin. Now, this is a Robert De Niro movie. Don't think it's like some kind of samurai film of any kind. But the movie Ronin, this is a classic, in my opinion, an absolute classic. It's from the 90s, but it plays like something out of the 70s. A brilliant little film. I can't wait to sit down, and watch this action. I mean, I could review that stuff for you all day long because it's the only thing worthwhile. And I'm just going to say this because, this subject has come up over and over again. I'm just going to say this quickly. The Renaissance didn't last forever, right? And maybe that's just what we have to consider, is that we had a few decades, maybe 100 years. That'd be generous. But we had a few decades where just this greatness, was being made in Hollywood and in the entertainment industry in general. Music, all of it. Games, all of it. Everything's a fucking remaster now. I just saw, this is their Command and Conquer remaster. After what happened with fucking StarCraft remastered and Warcraft 3 Reforged, no thanks. I'll wait. They want everybody to fucking pre-order it as usual, or they want limited run games who, for some reason, just can't release TIE Fighter, even though they have the rights to it. Man, I'm never going to get them as a sponsor, so fuck them. But really, that's, you tell people you get licenses for all the Star Wars games, and then you only release like 2 or 3. Or 4, or it's whatever. And you want me to spend $150 on some special? I don't believe it. I don't believe that I don't trust this whole remastering thing anymore. So even that process of remastering it, it's all fucked. Bottom line, okay, we had a few great decades, and maybe that's all you get every 1,000 years. Is you get a few great decades of tremendous art, like the Renaissance was, and then it just goes away. And then, you end up back in the Dark Ages, which is, would fit in with the dystopia that the real technological dystopia that we live in. It would fit in, right there with that. So that's kind of the conclusion I'm coming to, is that, we had a great run. It was amazing to be alive when all this stuff was coming out every week or every weekend, and you could talk about it with your friends and everything. That was awesome. But, the time's over, time's up, time's done. The Renaissance, and I don't know what term we're going to come up. I should come up with a term for it. And look, I know everything's a remix. There's nothing new under the sun. There's only 7 different types of stories, right? I know all of these things. I'm a writer myself. I know how that works. Okay. But god damn it. There's a whole lot you can do with 7 types of stories, I must admit. But regardless, I should come up with a name for this stuff, or for this time frame. I don't know, the 20th century Renaissance. Should we just call it that? Because it wasn't just American. But anyway, that's where we're at. So speaking of shit, I just tried out. I got an offer on my, of course, I use Google Fi. I know. But I got an offer to try YouTube Premium, the family plan, for free for a month, whatever. Okay, fine. I'll give it a shot. What the hell? Let's see how it goes. And, I've done it before, and I'll admit it. It can be very handy to have videos from YouTube just play in the background right from the app, and you get the notification for it. I really understand the convenience of that. There's plenty of ways, and there's plenty of alternative apps, to use for, was it like NewPipe and whatever, and F-Droid, that you could use that could get rid of a lot of that and could fix, really cleans up YouTube quite a bit. And on desktop, as long as you're using Firefox and you put on uBlock Origin, you're in pretty good shape. There's no problem there. We'll talk about that in a second too, actually. But, it can be handy to not have to fuss around with, getting past the horrible, horrible ads. Just the mind-numbing ads that are on there. Commercials even used to be a fucking great art form. I remember growing up. Yeah, I know. That's what old people say, right? I'm not that old. I'm only 38. I remember growing up. And they would have, like, Fox, which granted was still a relatively new network at this time, say in the 90s. But Fox, they would have like Sunday night specials where they would have where they would showcase the greatest commercials, right? That's how much of an art form commercials were. Just like music videos. Music videos used to, see, look at this. You get me started down the road and I just keep driving. I can't not complain about it. But we're going to keep rolling, and because this is relative to YouTube music, which is what I want to talk about here. Okay, for a second. We have a great conversation to get into, a couple great conversations. One of them is, was it the top 10 new technologies coming in 2020? Yeah, right? I mean, we're going to talk about it, but no, I don't think half of these are going to be a thing. But whatever, that's nice, MIT. You can bullshit everybody just like Silicon Valley does. And then we might even get into a classic Sovryn Tech subject, where it's not a might, we're going to get into this. And that has to do with none other than the thing that the Golden Stallion does not think has ever really been to Earth, at least not from outer space. Well, let's just say they haven't been to Earth, not in the way that most people think about it. Aliens. Woo, we're going to get into that. So we got great stuff to get into, but humor me for a moment. You know, I mean, everything used to be amazing. Music videos used to be masterpieces. They used to be wild pieces of art. Some of the most avant-garde, incredible shit you could ever see in your life that would challenge most movies, including their budgets. Commercials used to be amazing. Like I said, you used to have whole specials, hour-long specials that would just showcase the greatest commercials ever made. And in fact, these commercials are so great, ironically, you can go on YouTube and you can still watch a lot of these because some people have had, fortunately, the temerity to upload these pieces of art. I get it, it's marketing, but goddamn it, when you do it right, woo, you do it right. Nolan Cheddar, you know what I'm talking about. Eye of the Tiger. I mean, it was like everything was a fucking piece of art, and that's gone now. It doesn't exist anymore. And like music videos, man, you know me, I go to the gym all the time. And these fucking music videos, now, partly I get it, right? Actually, this kind of melds nicely into the YouTube music conversation. Partly I get it. I understand that most people watch video content on a 5 to 6 to 7 inch screen, right? Maybe 10. They're watching it on their smartphone or on their iPod, whatever. Or I mean, not iPod, iPad. Wish they were watching it on their iPod. Read a great story the other day about how there's people who are basically claiming the iPod, and it's so funny because I said this years ago on Sovryn Tech, that the iPod, talk about masterpieces, was a masterwork of technological innovation. And that it's unfortunate we left it behind, and there's an entire underground like modding group around the iPod. Now I know, and I mean the iPod Classic with the click wheel, and that's what I was referencing in the past. In fact, that we have ignored an entire UI, shall we say, because we've ignored the click wheel, when I think it's a brilliant UI that is very, very fast. But whatever, and it's still tactile, which is important. And I mean really tactile, not tactile like a fondle slab touchscreen. Anyway, so when I go to the gym, like there's music videos. I mean, there's a million screens everywhere, and I want them all to explode, and I want to turn them all off because, for fuck's sake, you're fucking work out, will you? Anyway, the music videos, I get it that they are not, most of them, unless it's like, I don't know, Taylor Swift or something, most of them are made with it in mind that whatever is on the screen has to be big. Not as an epic, as in it has to be of a large size. Okay, like you have to you're lucky if you can get a person's head in on the screen, as to where, 20, 30 years ago, okay, and I'm not going to get into the MTV conversation. That is a totally different economic situation. 20, 30 years ago, okay, you could see the person dance and do all this other kind of wild shit and, whatever they do on the screen. But now, because they know that it's going to be consumed on such a small screen, you can't really, there's no point to having a lot of detail. Now, I suppose that's economical in its own way for the music industry, because at the same time, they're clearly not putting a lot of money into music videos anymore, obviously, because there's no real money to be had there. The only real money to make in the music industry today is, the whole streaming metrics are absolute bullshit, but it's really just in concerts. Ironically, the music industry doesn't support the music that actually lends well to concerts, i.e. metal, but I rest my case. It's so funny. I mean, the music videos are so banal, bland, or they're trying to appeal to some kind of nostalgia, which, look, I don't mind how things looked in the 90s, but then don't appeal to nostalgia. Just fucking keep it as it was, right? Like, there's no need to go back if you don't ever really leave. But, you know, we have the Church of Eternal Growth and you have to keep going forward, or what appears to be forward, and really it's just a cyclical replaying on a theme. Now, another part of the problem here is with entertainment in general, you have a discovery issue. Well, let me tell you what the bulk, it appears anyway, the bulk of what Silicon Valley is pushing on you. And of course, understand that really, I mean, yeah, there's Pandora, which is of course really Sirius XM now. That allows for some discovery. Spotify is basically the only company in the music streaming game that doesn't equally belong to a tech giant, right? So, I mean, you have, you have Amazon Music, you have Google Play Music, you have Apple Music, you have YouTube Music now, which I had not used YouTube Music up until I tried this little free trial out. And the instant that I opened it up, in fact, it's funny, I'm opening it up right now, I'm looking at it, and it just asked me, overall, how satisfied are you with YouTube Music? There's dissatisfied, which has a very, wow, that is quite a frown on that face. I can relate to that. Or satisfied with a huge open mouth. I'm going to go with the fucking frown. I am completely dissatisfied. Thanks. Would you like to give us feedback? Not now, or send feedback? No, send feedback. In fact, let me write you a fucking paragraph. Oh, look, it actually lets me write a paragraph. If you excuse me, I'm going to pause the podcast and write out this paragraph. Here we go. And through the magic of editing, of course, I didn't write out a whole paragraph. No, you know what? I actually know grammar rules. A paragraph is 2 to 4 sentences. So, well, it's 3 to 4 usually, but 2 can also work as a paragraph. I did write 2 sentences. Let's see. The UI is horrible. You are killing music discovery and music itself, Google. Send feedback. Okay, sending. Anyway, all right, so we got that out of the way. So there, I let Google know just in case they don't happen to listen to this podcast, which they should. Look, here's the deal. Like, the UI in YouTube Music, like this looks like, I don't even think ADD and ADHD are like necessarily real things. I mean, I think they're byproducts of modern civilization, but regardless, this is clearly meant for people with like ADD and ADHD. I mean, there's no rhyme or real reason to any of this. It's all about playlists. There's nothing like actually teaching you. I mean, one of the things, that I actually agree with, there's people who are really hard on about vinyl, or they're actually even audio cassettes are back, or they're really hot about CDs still, which, hey, right on. I'm a Blu-ray guy. Granted, that has to do with movies, but I understand. And one of the things that people will talk about is how, when you'd have like the books and the liner notes and everything, you could learn so much about the music. And there really are, like, even learning about guys who do, the engineering or the production, the producers, whatever, if it's like Mutt Lange or Bruce Fairbairn or something like that, right? You get, or, not Bill Coyne. Anyway, that's a manager. But regardless, like, you could learn these things, and you could find out that, oh, Desmond Child wrote this. And then you could find out, well, shit, what other music did Desmond Child write for whatever other artists? And then you end up discovering music because you knew of the person who actually originally wrote the song. Of course, Desmond Child is arguably the greatest songwriter of all time. He's had bands in the past, but like, he's mainly known for working with other bands, right? Kiss, I guess Bon Jovi, even Alice Cooper. Go down the fucking list. And you don't really get to know music. And YouTube Music just seems to be the culmination of and I used to think this wasn't a thing, but now I'm absolutely fucking convinced that it is. The dumbing down, the stupefying, even though I know stupefying actually isn't a word that should be used in that way, but the dumbing down of people in general. It's so funny because Silicon Valley's supposed to be all about, isn't their whole ideology that, well, the more information people have access to, the better. But every UI I see that comes from these asshat companies is actually about the elimination of music and just automating whatever you want, taking you completely out of the equation, or your choices out of the equation. This is so, I mean, go ahead, take a look, go online. In fact, I'll give you my blessing. Go ahead and use, use Google if you want to. Okay. Use their search engine and just type in the images, just type in YouTube Music UI and take a look at this. And I mean, it's a clusterfuck. There's no way, like, I don't even know what I want to listen to when I look at this. It's the strangest goddamn thing, and YouTube, of all things, should know very well what I'm into and what I'm listening to, but it's a mess. It's a mess. It looks like it's made for children. Now, maybe that's it. I don't know, but kids, I mean, I know when I was young, when I was a little kid, I was obsessive over reading the books, reading the lyrics, or, reading the insert, the CD insert or whatever, or the insert for the audio cassette. I mean, it felt like it was added value that I was getting with the music that I purchased. And well, I mean, I guess maybe that's part of it too, is that people don't actually purchase music anymore because they're a bunch of communists, but whatever. Okay. Not knocking communists there, but you are. I mean, granted, I look at something like YouTube Music and it proves my theory that most people, most people are dumb, yes. But it also proves my theory that most people, they don't really love music. There is a feeling, some kind of sensation, there is a background noise that music can give them for moments, or again, that it can kind of make them feel, and that's what they actually love. But they don't really love music itself, right? Because if they loved music itself, I would imagine that they'd be, a librarian about its accumulation. As in, they would be, like, oh yeah, I'd itemize this, list it out. I mean, everything would be orderly because, they love music so much. They want to have something that resembles some kind of system, some kind of systemization to how they could easily access what they wanted in whatever moment, or if they wanted it available to be able to share with somebody else very quickly, but they don't. Now, granted, YouTube Music, I mean, I don't have any metrics on it, as far as or any stats as far as how many people are actually using this fucking thing. And it's ironic because, other than, and years ago, I covered why I stopped using Google Play Music, but that was like my music service for a while. Partly because it let me upload my own files in addition to what it offered on its subscription service. Okay. But Google Play Music was actually a brilliant UI. I mean, and very much, in my opinion, for music lovers. It really, really did a great job as far as that goes. So how maybe Google must have gotten the metrics. Well, nobody's using Google Play Music when we made it to at least to appear for people that really do love music for music's sake and not just for their own saucy feelings. Okay. And they said, well, nobody used it. So they must want the complete fucking opposite. They don't want any thought whatsoever. They just want some kind of music to come on that's maybe remotely based upon what their YouTube, what they've watched on YouTube or something. And granted, a lot of people do listen to music via YouTube. I mean, that's a fact. Vivo did huge business, right? On YouTube. But yeah, I mean, that's the only thing I can imagine is that they thought, holy shit, we need to just do the exact opposite and make this as dumbed down as we could possibly, make it. But of course, the issue there also is that now YouTube proper limits how you can, watch or how you can experience music on the YouTube website itself and the YouTube app itself. It basically wants to force you to use YouTube Music or have a premium subscription to get access to music on YouTube. And how does that, again, that's part of why I just sent them the feedback. You're killing music discovery when you do that. When you put friction between somebody and finding out about a song, you just fucked them. Annoying as hell. I mean, I looked at this, I almost had an aneurysm when I saw the UI on this fucking thing. And I was like, well, is anybody going to know anybody as far as musicians go in the future outside of perhaps, whatever the music industry or Silicon Valley wants to, thrust upon you as somehow being talented, which is highly debatable. Anyway, in good news on, at least on Android, A new version of Firefox coming out later this year for Android. That's supposed to be faster, blah, blah, blah. Of course, a couple years ago, was it 2017 when they came out with the Quantum engine? They were shooting for that as well, which it did get faster, admittedly. But they plan on, they're revamping the hell out of this thing. And revamping it to the point, and this is only on Android as I understand it, what I looked into. They're revamping it to the point that the add-ons, because one of the advantages of having Firefox on Android was that you could use add-ons from Firefox proper, like right into it. So you could put uBlock Origin, right, or even LastPass or Dark Reader, Facebook Container. I mean, all the great add-ons, especially ones that really only work well with Firefox, like, say, ad blockers, because Chrome, fuck that. And you could put them right onto, on your smartphone, which is, a Satan send, okay? So, but now they're revamping it to where they're going to be particular with what add-ons are able to work on mobile. And to some degree, this makes sense, because they more or less make every add-on available, but not every add-on works very well on mobile. But the one that they're going to make sure it works right out of the gate is uBlock Origin. And the language seemed to suggest they're just going to bake uBlock Origin right into Firefox. I am totally supportive of this. I think it's wonderful. In fact, I have to give Mozilla a big round of applause, because, even using it in general, the amount of notifications that they give, and these are normally, look, notifications are the bane of the 21st century, regardless of platform, right? But I have appreciated that Mozilla, like in Firefox, will have notifications pop up all the time saying, hey, we just blocked you from this. We just blocked you from this. We just blocked you from this. And if anything, just to educate people and to make it plain to them of how much they are being tracked and how many different surveillance technologies are being used against them just as they traverse the World Wide Web. This is nothing but a good thing. I think it's a goddamn beautiful thing, quite frankly. So, and look, I know everybody's like, look, why I hear so many people, even in MySpace, and I don't mean MySpace.com, I mean my space, my sphere of influence, who are like, oh, can't everybody just fucking go to Chrome already, or go to the Chromium engine, right? Can't everybody just get on Blink? Edge finally did, everything, or Credge as we call it. Can't everybody jump on that? No, this is why. Granted, Chromium doesn't require you necessarily to really hinder and handicap ad blockers, okay? And certainly Microsoft could do their own ad blocking if they want. But the fact that there is just a very quick and easy alternative, like Firefox, where whatever horseshit happens on Chrome and Chromium, isn't there. And you can, that there is the option where you can go and take the risks. Dynamite. Mozilla's making a lot of other great moves recently, too. We're going to be covering some of those because it's raising a lot of ire. Of course, we all now famously remember when basically Britain considered Mozilla to be public enemy number one on the internet. Which there was a listener, great listener, who in the Sovereign Tech Telegram group, which link is in the show notes for that if you want to join. So many more people joining every week, and we just have the most tremendous conversations. Who basically said, it's like, if I ever got that kind of notoriety, I would put that on a plaque on the wall of my office in a heartbeat. And I was like, yeah, baby, you better believe it. That's so great. Anyway, Firefox for Android doing great. I love that they're adding that in, and certainly we will be keeping an eye on that. A lot of what Mozilla is doing, including their VPN service. I've been testing that out. Works very, very nicely. Couple of oddities with it. It is still in beta. We will be doing deeper dives on that, especially since it's based on WireGuard, which warrants its own conversation in upcoming episodes of Sovereign Tech, and we will get to that. But all right. So speaking of which, one of the things that I love that Firefox VPN does, so Firefox VPN, or FPN, as I think they're trying to call it, Firefox Private Network, Right now, you can only use it on Windows, Android, and, of all things, Chromebook. Of course, because Chromebooks have an Android, compatibility layer in it. Of course, it's all Linux, but anyway. Amazingly, Firefox VPN, and this is the irony, and I've tested other VPNs on Chromebooks, through their varying Android apps or browser extensions. Amazingly, Firefox VPN is probably the best VPN as far as like uptime, staying consistent, and doing its job that I've seen on Chromebooks to date. Even with, in fact, this is a little conversation to have here. I've had this on Q&As recently, and I haven't gotten into it because we did the coronavirus episode last week, and so I didn't get into this subject. There have been recent stories, update issues that Microsoft has had with Windows 10 to the point, and this happened a year ago, but it's also happened in the past month, where, and Microsoft has confirmed that these things have happened, where users, and it's not because of any funny labeling of their partitions or hard drives, Windows 10 users are losing data, and it is just gone. And Microsoft has confirmed that this is happening due to update scenarios. I think I see every week, you're going to see where I'm going with this, okay? In fact, actually, sometimes it seems like every day, I get a notification where Forbes is writing an article with almost the same exact headline. In fact, it'd be interesting to go in a search engine, use DuckDuckGo if you can, folks, to go to a search engine and type in Microsoft warns millions or billions, pick your term, millions would be the safe bet, of course, of Windows users, Windows 10 users about, and just type that in, warns millions of Windows 10 users. And I bet, look at the timeline of these stories. There's probably at least one a week, if not even more than that. Okay, so people are, media outlets are running wild with all of these stories of, really, it has to do with the update process that Windows 10 is, granted Microsoft is constantly revamping, which might not be a good thing in and of itself, but through its updates, or, they'll find out that there's some 0-day, which isn't surprising because, Windows 10 is still arguably the most used operating system. It's, always between that and Android in the world. Actually, really, I think Linux more or less is, but the devices that Linux finds itself on, or that the Linux kernel specifically finds itself on, doesn't always get considered a computer, so it doesn't necessarily have a user. Getting funny with terms here, but bottom line, as far as like what most people sit down and use a lot of, I guess the argument could be made that it's between Android and Windows 10, right? So anyway, my point being is that, it makes sense that there are lots of 0-days, lots of, exploits found for Windows because they're constantly being created because it's a profitable thing to do because so many people use Windows, right? Not a surprise to anybody listening to Sovryn Tech, or longtime listeners anyway, or people that keep an eye on tech news in general. But when it gets to the point, like all that, there's reasons why that happens, right? That makes sense. It sucks, but it makes sense. When you are using a business's service, in this case, Windows 10, and there is data loss because of the actions of the business, not your own action or inaction, that is an instantaneous. If anybody else did this, if you were using Dropbox, right? If your business, or even just you personally, because how many of us are, personal entrepreneurs? Maybe you're an author and you self-publish and whatever else. Okay. So many people are today. It's just the way it seems to go. If Dropbox lost any of your data and it was just gone, not recoverable, sayonara, are you going to tell me seriously that you're going to stick with that fucking company? No way. That's an instantaneous, see you later. I'm done with you. When it's because of malfeasance, because of actions of the business itself, which is exactly what's going on with Windows 10 with the update process, where updates are coming out and then suddenly data is just, going away and it's gone forever. And these aren't just like dumb people. These were people who are Windows diehards who know exactly what they're doing with Windows, etc., and it was happening to them. And that's insane. Now, again, we talked about this in the Q&A a couple weeks ago, but I want to reiterate it here and drive a point home here on the big show. Bottom line, when that happens, they are not, Microsoft is no longer deserving of your business as far as operating systems go, when their operating system is causing that. Data deletion. Permanent. Gone. That's just too risky. You cannot have that. You can't operate that way as a business, and in a world where the digital world and the physical world are so intertwined, you can't have that. And here's the bottom line, and here's my advice for this going forward. And I'm not the first person to say this. This conversation has been being had for the past month now. I would argue that I've been saying it for the longest time and prepping people for this moment. This moment is here. Windows does not belong in the home. No more. That's it. It's not, I get it. There's enterprise solutions. There's business solutions where it's necessary, or should I say for business solutions. There's certain software that you need or whatever that your business relies upon or something, or that the enterprise space might rely upon, etc. Okay. Then in a professional setting, in a professional realm, in a professional capacity, fine. Windows can belong there. Okay? But in the home, for the everyday user, no more. No more. It's gotten to that point, and there's no reason for it. And fuck Google. I'll be the first and the loudest to say that. Okay? But really, actually, I just noticed Chrome OS 80 just came out and added a slew of features. One of the features that it interestingly added, of course, it's something most Linux distros have had forever, okay, is that it has multiple desktops now. Now, look, Chrome OS has gone from the point of where it can only do one thing at a time to now it's to the point where, it has Android apps, it has Linux apps. In fact, now it has full Flatpak support for installing those, okay? And now it has multiple desktops. They are expecting you to use these fucking things as a goddamn workstation, ironically. And I frankly, I think they're to the point for that. Now, do I want everybody using Chromebooks? No, not necessarily. Chromebooks have their place when it comes to travel and things like this. And depending what environments you're going into, certainly, because it is a very, very secure platform. It's not perfect security, what the fuck is, but it is a very secure platform. But, should everybody at home be using Linux? Yeah. If I was Ubuntu, or Canonical, this is the moment, this is the time. I'm just hearing the song from, the musical for Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, because this is it. It's gotten that bad. It's been that bad for a while, but it's really at that stage. There is the everyday person. In fact, you know what? If people are dumb, then here, I'm just going to say it. Then the everyday Muppron should be using a Chromebook straight up. There it is. I said it. Yeah, okay, if you're into Mac, fine, use Mac. But, the everyday person probably also can't necessarily afford Macs, right? And for whatever reason, Apple has not done anything to really make of course, granted, I think it's because they don't feel like there's money in making affordable computers anymore, right? The Mac Mini's still kind of there, but then the average person just wants a laptop that's an all-in-one, right? They're not looking at getting it to everybody. I can't believe I'm saying it, but really, just stop with Windows. Get off of Windows. It doesn't belong in the home anymore. It's over. We're talking about times come and gone. Windows never really had a renaissance, but it sure as fuck isn't going to get one now. Windows 10 tried, and oh, did it try. And I had some favorable things to say when it was initially out there. No, that's it. It's over. It's over. I can't believe I'm saying this, that I'm actually recommending that the everyday person use a Chromebook, but look, you might as well. If somebody came up to me and say, well, what would you do with this Windows computer? Before I'd say toss it into, the nearest lake of fire. How could I as a tech journalist, as a tech, I don't want to call myself a tech enthusiast. How about as a cybersecurity specialist? I'm certainly that. A computer specialist. How am I supposed to tell somebody, some like a family member or something, oh, I want to get a new computer. What should I get? How could I possibly say to them, buy a Windows machine? Really? I can't. And again, Ubuntu has gotten to the point, in fact, in April, we have Ubuntu 2004 coming out, which is a long-term stable release. So you can install it. It's going to be good for 5 years. It's actually, when we talked about this on Cybertech Prime a couple months ago, it's actually an extended long-term release. So that means that it's going to get security updates for the next 10 years. Fine. Put Ubuntu on a machine and it is going to work like a dream for the next 10 fucking years when you put Ubuntu 2004 on it. That's what people should be running at home in a perfect world. And I don't think Ubuntu is hard to install for anybody. It's just gotten to that point. It's really not that hard. And, you can buy from Dell, you can buy from other companies that will have Ubuntu already on the computer. Okay. But otherwise, yeah, seriously, folks, just buy a fucking Chromebook. I cannot in good conscience tell people to buy a computer that is going to delete from no actions of their own, the user themselves, that it's going to delete their data. I can't do it. So I'm not going to anymore. I'm not going to make any arguments for Windows machines other than within a professional setting, because there's legacy software that's been around forever. Even I run into that, and we could talk about using VMs and all that, but those don't operate. Okay. There's a perfect world in which VMs work, and then there's a real world in which VMs don't exactly work as they should. So anyway, yeah, I mean, and again, look, Google is trying to make Chrome OS a workhorse for you, right? I mean, the fact that they're putting in multiple desktops, I don't even know who is asking for that. And actually, it kind of detracts me from what I have liked about Chromebooks in the past. I mean, I bought some of the first Chromebooks when they first came out because I actually liked that it didn't multitask. Right? That it was about doing one thing at a time and concentrating on doing one thing at a time. And now they have multiple desktops. I mean, that's just, that's kind of antithetical to that. But then at the same time, do I want a world where Windows 10 or where Windows isn't in homes anymore? Yes. And Chromebooks are at the very least a viable and very secure stopgap as far as that goes. Privacy conversation, not even coming up. We're not even getting into that. But there it is. So anyway, I really want to get into this conversation around aliens. No, I really do. But before I get to that, first off, let's get in a little sponsor here. Of course, a great place to where this message also would be a good place for it to get out on is none other than the number 26 talk show in the United States. None other than Sovryn Tech sponsor, Free Talk Live. Why don't you go to freetalklive.com? This is a show that runs 7 nights a week, 3 hours per night, 365 days per year. And again, it is the number 26 talk show in the United States. That is remarkable. You are going to have people there that are going to that really should hear the message. Hey, get Windows out of your house. I mean, Windows 10. It's nice to have Windows in a home. We're not to that stage yet where we need to block out all the zombies or something. I don't know. But anyway, yeah, but I mean, what a great place to get that message out. Why? Because Free Talk Live is an open phones call-in show where you can talk about whatever you want to talk about. You really can take control of it. It's not like Sovryn Tech where I run it like an absolute tyrant. Woo. No. No, I let people. Actually, the story I'm about to get into came in from a listener. And a great listener at that. Brilliant guy. But regardless, Free Talk Live, check it out. You have so much content. The show's been going for well over a decade. It's probably got to be going on almost 2 decades here soon enough. Plenty of content to listen to. And there are some fun times to be had, some informative times to be had. And you can join in on the action by calling in as well. So I thank them for sponsoring Sovryn Tech. I know they appreciate what we put out here, and I certainly appreciate what they're putting out. freetalklive.com. Do check them out. Now, let's get back to some Sovryn Tech here. This story, I'll put a link in the show notes for it. I'm just going to breeze through this because it can be breezed through. Breezed, is that right? I don't know. Anyway, here we go. And this is from MIT's Technology Review, which actually we read from last week as well, about coronavirus. But here we go. 10 Breakthrough Technologies 2020. I don't think that's proper English, frankly, but okay, we're going to roll with it. Here is our annual list of technological advances that we believe will make a real difference in solving important problems. How do we pick? We avoid the one-off tricks, the overhyped new gadgets. Instead, we look for those breakthroughs that will truly change how we live and work. We're excited to announce that this year's list, we're also launching our very first whatever. I don't care about their podcast. Everybody's got a fucking podcast, right? Woo! Anyway, so here's their top 10. Let's break this down, okay? And this won't take long because, like I said, I want to get into that alien conversation. Number 1, unhackable internet. That should bother the fuck out of everybody as soon as you hear that word unhackable. Okay. Anyway, despite the fact that the Chinese government is very much attempting to hack into what is basically known as the quantum internet, I am telling you this. This is not what MIT is talking about. These kinds of stories are bullshit, right? Like, listicles are crap largely in the first place. Okay. Now, granted, I do my Sovryn top 8s now and then, but those are actually coming from, frankly, I like to say the heart, and I'm not trying to sell you anything when I do those. As to where this, I think they're trying to sell you some shit. Anyway, I'm going to read, most of these don't need anything to be read into, okay? They give a little blurb about each one, but let's talk about number 1, because here's the irony, okay? Now, probably the reason this story is titled 10 Breakthrough Technologies 2020, not that they're going to appear in 2020, even though the meta title, which is, so a lot of people don't realize this, there is a title that you can put into, say, like a WordPress blog or something like that, that will make a title show up as something different in a search engine than when you actually click and go to the story. Okay, that's called a meta title. Most people don't realize this kind of crap. Unfortunately, I know what it's like to work in PR, and I know, all the dirty tricks, shall we say. And this is a very common thing. So, like, when you share this, it'll often come up with a very different title, but it's meant to suggest that these are breakthroughs that are coming in 2020. No, they're not. In fact, I'll prove the point right here. So, unhackable internet. Let me read this blurb. An internet based on quantum physics will soon enable inherently secure communication. A team led by Stephanie Weiner at Delft University of Technology is building a network connecting 4 cities in the Netherlands entirely by means of quantum technology. Messages sent over this network will be unhackable. Now, I think we actually might have talked about Stephanie Weiner a couple of years ago when they initially announced this. And of course, that's part of the rub here, right? Is that this quantum internet, we've talked about it for years on this show. The challenges and problems around it, which we'll talk about again briefly as, again, I go through this list and say, this is all meaninglessness, or this is all meaningless. But we talked about this. This is not something new for 2020. So MIT is basically just picking stuff, they're more or less pulling stuff out of a hat and saying, see, and yep, we got this. Oh, and we've got this. When none of this may actually even work. It probably isn't going to come for the next few years. So why even do this story? In fact, frankly, it feels like they're just trying to do I hate this term, but feels like a bit of predictive programming or something. Or this is something to make investors feel good that are investing in some of these technologies, or to maybe get some grants or funding for MIT or some shit. Because really none of this stuff is real yet. Anyway, yes, quantum internet is a thing. Okay, we'll talk about the problems. Let me read the blurb, then I'll give you some reality. Here we go. So they're building a network connecting 4 cities in the Netherlands. Let's keep going. In the last few years, scientists have learned to transmit pairs of photons across fiber optic cables in a way that absolutely protects the information encoded in them. A team in China used a form of the technology to construct a 2,000-kilometer network backbone between Beijing and Shanghai, but that project relies partly on classical components that periodically break the quantum link before establishing a new one, introducing the risk of hacking. The Delft network, in contrast, will be the first to transmit information between cities using quantum techniques from end to end. Technology relies on quantum behavior of atomic particles called entanglement. Entangled photons can't be covertly read without disrupting their content, blah, blah, blah. So basically, when there's an attempt to, this is how a quantum internet works, when, as far as encryption goes, when there is an attempt to read what is being sent, okay, through this quantum encryption from end to end, the photons will recognize that attempt, and then, it becomes instantly unreadable. So there's no way you can know. That's why they're calling it unhackable, okay, is that you can't exploit the network, the quantum network. Okay. So anyway, let's keep reading. But entangled particles are difficult to create and harder still to transmit over long distances. Wayner's team has demonstrated it can send them more than 1.5 kilometers, so about a mile, and they are confident they can set up a quantum link between Delft and The Hague by around the end of this year. Ensuring an unbroken connection over greater distances will require quantum repeaters that extend the network. Such repeaters are currently in design at Delft and elsewhere. The first should be, here's the key thing, right? They say this is 2020. Kiss my ass. The first should be completed in the next 5 to 6 years, says Wayner, with a global quantum network following by the end of the decade. So, is this a breakthrough in 2020? No. Do you know why these repeaters aren't going to be done for the next 5 to 6 years? That's because they become a central point of failure for this quantum internet. Because, okay, fine, you can't, on the lines running from end to end where the quantum, encryption is happening, right? You can't interfere with that. But because it can only be done over very short distances, you need to have repeaters, every bit to make it an entire, like, say, global network or even something that could run between cities. Okay, like the 4 cities they're planning in the Netherlands. This is the challenge. You can do a quantum internet in a very small space right now, no problem, and have, I don't want to call it perfect encryption, but for all intents and purposes. Okay, I don't want to call it unhackable because I don't think that word should ever be used, but for all intents and purposes, I'll run with their jargon. Okay, you could do that right now, but you could only do it maybe a foot or 2. I mean, you really, you can't go far with it outside of whatever Wayner's developing at Delft. To suggest that somehow this is going to become a reality, there are so many aspects to a quantum internet that are completely unproven. And look, there's not a whole lot of point to a quantum internet. I mean, the point of doing a quantum internet is the encryption. If you cannot ensure the encryption, there is no real point to doing it over what you could call a classical internet that we have now. You could say, oh, well, there's speed advantages, there's this. Once again, okay, the cost of laying all this out and everything, I mean, in comparison to the supposed speed gains you're going to get, look, we can have fiber do with classical styled internet. We could have that do some pretty impressive fucking speeds if you lay it out, and it'd be a lot cheaper than lay it out on a whole new quantum internet, right? So unless you can do the encryption, don't bother. And that is still, while quantum encryption, that's proven, being able to do it over long distances is not. And so why even talk about this? It's pure clickbait horseshit. It's not real. It doesn't exist. It's not a breakthrough technology at all. Okay, now if you're going to use it in small spaces, sure, then maybe that's the argument, but that's not what they're writing about. They're like, oh yeah, we're going to be able to do it over blah, blah, blah. I swear this is just to get investors or something. This is so stupid. And I heavily debate how well quantum repeaters are going to really work. I mean, this is the same thing that was going on between Edison and Tesla, right? back 100 years ago, more, where you had AC versus DC, right? AC took over because AC could, you could have a power plant that could power such a large geographic area, as to where with DC you had to have a bunch of power plants to cover the same range. And so AC won, right? I mean, there's other arguments to be had around AC and DC as well. I'm kind of oversimplifying it, but bottom line being, this is the same concept. And quantum internet is not going to become a thing if it can't solve, or, if it can't resolve the same problems that DC had when AC got introduced by Nikola Tesla. Anyway, moving on. So that's horseshit. Let's go to the next one. Hyper-personalized medicine. Novel drugs are being designed to treat unique genetic mutations. This should, frankly, whether this is real and happening right now, this should terrify the fuck out of you, because for their ability to make hyper-personalized medicine means they know that much about you. You could say that that's ultimately a good thing to handle all these different genetic mutations. I wonder about that. There's a big conversation to have around that has to do with genetics that, I don't know. Anyway, let me read the last paragraph here on this one. The real challenge for N of 1 treatments, a reference to the number of people who get the drug, is that they just defy about every accepted notion of how pharmaceuticals should be developed, tested, and sold. Who will pay for these drugs when they help one person, but still take large teams to design and manufacture? And that's getting at the economic argument, to say nothing of the privacy and, data collection argument around it. The economic argument around it's like, wait, you'll develop medicines that work only for me, for my specific genetic mutations. I mean, in one sense, I'm glad about this, because it points at what I have been saying for a while on this show, that Western medicine does not pay attention to the fact that everybody's an individual, right down to, the deepest aspects of what makes life, right down to your genetics, right down to so much. And because of that, them constantly schlepping, I don't know, whatever new crap that Glaxo Wellcome's coming out with, to say that that's going to cure it for everybody, I mean, that's ludicrous. So whatever condition it's trying to cure. But then the economic incentives is to try and create, what's economically feasible, not even incentives, but what's feasible is to try and create something, a wonder drug that works for everybody. And hope, with luck, keeps everybody hooked on it for a long, you don't want something that actually, because if people are actually healthy, wow, what's going to happen to that part of the economy? Oops. So, yeah, I don't buy it. Bottom line, this, great. Is it possible? Yeah, I'm sure that there are areas where it's possible. Is it going to actually become a thing? No, I don't think so. Not hyper-personalized medicine. Not unless we open source the fuck out of everything. That's the only way that that's going to happen, and you educate people to the point that they really could, diagnose themselves in better ways. But you tell me how viable that future is going to end up being. Digital money. This is one. Yeah, this is the one on this list that exists, is real, and its effects of it being real are already being felt, but it's not a breakthrough of 2020. Digital money is a breakthrough of 2008 and 2009, and nobody took it seriously. I'm not going to knock MIT because they've had Bitcoin meetups for almost a decade now. Okay, I got to give them credit for that. But yeah, digital money is not a breakthrough of 2020. Whatever. Anti-aging drugs. Yeah, right. Yes, I think anti-aging stuff can be a thing, but do you see how meaningless this list is? AI discovered molecules. Yeah, sure. Satellite mega constellations. The idea that we can have thousands of satellites surrounding the Earth and we can control them all, through automation and everything, and not have to do a whole lot of maintenance to them, and, put up minor CubeSats and all that. Yep, that's a reality. Is that a good thing? Space debris, space garbage. Moving on. Quantum supremacy. This is a subject we've talked about throughout 2019. In fact, even at the end of it, they say that they admit that Google's, supposed quantum supremacy that they hit last year was really just a demo, and it wasn't practical, which is the point that I've always brought up, that even if it's real, it's not something practical. And even in this, they say that the machines are a decade away. So not really a breakthrough for 2020 at all. Again, I don't understand this article. Tiny AI, basically saying machine learning is getting baked right into your smartphone. Okay, if this is a breakthrough, this part is probably absolutely true. But then, is it a good thing? You tell me, Clearview. Woo! Differential privacy, something that will never be implemented by governments, because that's the argument for this. In fact, let me read this one. This is hilarious. Differential privacy, a technique to measure the privacy of a crucial data set. In 2020, the U.S. government has a big task: collect data on the country's 330 million residents while keeping their identities private. Wait. Do you think the U.S. government does that? No. The data is released in statistical tables that policymakers and academics analyze when writing legislation or conducting research. By law, the Census Bureau must make sure that it can't lead back to any individuals. Then why does the Census Bureau ask so many more questions when they call you on the phone? That's horseshit. Anyway, reading on. So, let's see. But there are tricks to de-anonymize individuals, especially if the census data is combined with other public statistics. So the Census Bureau injects inaccuracies or noise into the data. It might make some people younger and others older, or label some white people as black and vice versa, while keeping the totals of each age or ethnic group the same. The more noise you inject, the harder de-anonymization becomes. Differential privacy is a mathematical technique that makes this process rigorous by measuring how much privacy increases when noise is added. The method is already used by Apple and Facebook to collect aggregate data without identifying particular users. But too much noise can render the data useless. One analysis showed that a differentially private version of the 2010 census included households that supposedly had 90 people. If all goes well, the method will likely be used by other federal agencies. Countries like Canada and the UK are watching too. No. I mean, they might claim that they're going to use this, but I guarantee you they're going to have some kind of master de-anonymization technique. Does the government want less data or more about you? They want more. Of course they do. They don't want less. You know that. This is crazy. And say Apple and Facebook are already implementing this stuff. No, they're not. I mean, they might be paying lip service to the concept. They might be testing out to see if it works. But Facebook literally operates off of you. I mean, because this idea of differential privacy, it's basically stenography, right? Where, you have a picture and you can hide things within the picture, say symbols, or you can hide words within the picture. I mean, it's just the digital form of that. All right. And it's a real thing. Adding noise, to data sets is a great and wonderful thing. But then if you want to anonymize this data, how about you just don't collect it? It's hilarious to me. I mean, I have to feel, I don't have to, but I like to feel that if even, and I have no faith or belief, or I sure as fuck don't have any data to suggest that politicians give a rat shit about me or know anything or have any kind of brain upstairs, or, that they want to do what is quote unquote right, whatever that means. But I like to imagine that 100 years ago, or say even, maybe the founding fathers, that if they knew what even census data, how that could impinge, could hurt someone's freedoms, that they wouldn't even allow for that they would write that right out of the Constitution. We know now what happens when such and so much data gets collected and stored and gets schlepped around. I mean, the Clearview AI thing is a conversation, an argument that is absolutely happening in the halls of Congress, and that is happening in the Supreme Court. I mean, or if it's not already happening in there, it is certainly getting prepped and ready. Okay, and you already have companies even in Silicon Valley saying, hey, you can't use our data for what, the facial recognition that you're engaging in. But then the government says, well, it's public info. I mean, they can do what they want. I mean, this is an argument that's happening. But we see the dangers of implementing, or of random data collection like this. okay, of this unstructured data. Now, to have, or even structured data. Now, to want to bring noise into that, again, differential privacy, a great and wonderful thing. I don't think it's a new idea for 2020, but a great and wonderful thing. But so many of these companies, if they're implementing it, like I said, I mean, Google would go out of business if they did that, right? I mean, there's so many companies that would just completely go out of business if they're really baking this in. Apple, maybe not, right? Because Apple puts the Apple tax and everything that they sell you, and they can just, thrive off of that. But all the other companies, like Facebook, that has to put their shit out basically for free, no, they want as much data as they can possibly about you. So this is they're twisting the reality here with bringing this up. The last one has to do with climate change attribution. Whatever. I'm not even going to go there. But these breakthrough technologies, most of them aren't breakthroughs. They've actually been around for a while. To say that they're only coming up in 2020 is, a complete misnomer. And some of this stuff is an outright lie, in my opinion. So nothing really to get excited about with this article, but I'll put it in the show notes anyway. So let's get into, all right. Let's do it. We want to talk aliens. I could stop right there, but I've just been complaining this whole episode, and I'd like to actually have more of a conversation instead of just moaning and groaning, as it were. Look, don't confuse me. There are technologies out there being actively developed that are popular, that are doing great and wonderful things, okay, for humanity as a species overall. Bitcoin, for example, it's the easy one to point at. There really are. But there is this attitude still, and especially in the tech podcasting space, of just, to me, it seems like constant positivity of, the tech giants will solve everything. No, they won't. And no, that the next version of whatever is not going to somehow make your life that much better or solve the problems that we've been discussing right now. There are people who have been around for a while, who maybe aren't under the, pay of Google. Okay. FinSurf, who is under the pay of Google. But there are people outside of that realm who fortunately are raising a bit of the red flag, saying, hey, this stuff hasn't turned out the way we expected, and we're sorry. And we'd really like to reverse some of these trends. And I guess Sovryn Tech just wants to be here when it needs to be to put some cold water on the fever dreams of Silicon Valley. Or MIT in this case, because there's not a single thing in that article that I felt excited about. And it's not because I'm that cynical. It's because I've been following everything that they're talking about, and I know just how far away any of it is, and to write about it is frankly dishonest. To try and get people excited about it now is dishonest. And maybe they just... Are you in a flying car? Are you living on the moon right now? Are you living on Mars? No. 50 years ago, you were being given articles saying popular science, popular mechanics, whatever, that would tell you that. And that didn't end up happening. Okay? And I think that there is a general malaise, a certain depression among people who should know better now, that they don't recognize. I've talked about this so many times on this show, that I think everybody, even though, again, most people, yes, I'm going to say it, they're stupid. Even the dum-dums feel this sense that something is off. Well, part of what's off is that even in the United States, you have been sold a certain bill of goods by articles, movies even, media of all types, that promise shit much like that MIT article did. And almost none of it happened. It just didn't happen. And I think we are still reeling as a society, as a culture, even. America's a bit of a melting pot, to put it mildly, and that's a great thing. But there is, certainly an Americana, right? And I think Americana is still reeling, and actually much of the rest of the world too, is still reeling from the fact that all of these things we kept getting promised in the 60s, in the 50s and 60s, never came into being. We might be, we're going to talk about aliens here in a second. I do think that we're finally about to get to the point where, we will be, everyday people will be living on the moon or on Mars or maybe on some asteroid in the prime asteroid belt or on Titan or Enceladus or, whatever. Okay. I think we're getting there, but then that is a journey that took 100 years to get there. And if we were more founded in reality and not like constantly just expecting someone out there, NASA or whoever, to handle the situation for the past 50 years, maybe we would have already been there if we weren't buying into the promises of, well, really the media in general. I mean, that could get into a whole side conversation about the power of podcasting, because it is a powerful medium, because it doesn't have to be beholden to anybody. But anyway, I don't want to go down that road, but we've got to be really real about what's actually possible right now and what's genuinely feasible, what we know will be feasible in the near future. I am totally fine with speculating and having flights of fancy, but those kinds of articles live in a quasi realm of reality, where they're saying, oh yeah, this is the breakthrough 2020. But then the article itself is saying, but we're 5 years, 6 years out, or we're a decade out from it happening. Okay, then it's not real yet. Until I can buy it, until I can install it in my home or actually ingest it in my body, it's not real. And you need to tout it as such. That it's not real. Don't treat it like this is what's happening. This is the future we're looking at. No. Until the future's here, shut your fucking mouth. Okay? Now, the irony of me saying that is that here I'm going to talk about the possibility of aliens, encountering aliens on Earth. I know, and this is going to be in the realm of speculation, but then I'm telling you that this is all speculation on my part. Okay, or on the part of the people writing it. As long as you make it clear that it's speculation, it's fine to speculate. It is not fine to state things as fact when they are not, which is what MIT was engaging in. Anyway, and MIT is not the only one. Again, I mean, all the crap, all those like old Werner von Braun videos where he's saying, yeah, in the next 10 years, we are going to use a 3-stage rocket to take people to Mars, and then it doesn't happen. That's dishonest. That's when you're not responsibly speculating. Anyway, I saw, and it was almost strange, and granted, with algorithms, how can you really tell? But I used DuckDuckGo, and these were coming up via Firefox. So, granted that, how on the Firefox new tab page, how it has pocket stories come up. Granted, those are based on like an aggregate of how many people are reading those stories. So like it's what's popular, it's what's trending. And other people might not be so careful in avoiding algorithms as I am. So maybe there's still some algorithmic control over what's showing up here. But regardless, I noticed quite a few stories that had a basic headline of that aliens may already be here on Earth or have already been here, etc. There was one where an astronaut was saying, and it wasn't Ed Mitchell, by the way. If you know about Ed Mitchell, you know why it's important to caveat that. Where an astronaut was saying, yeah, I think aliens have already been here or are already here or something like this. Okay. But then there was a more, shall I say, or slightly more interesting one that was from the San Francisco Chronicle, which was headlined, "Scientists theorize that space aliens may already be here, but we don't recognize them." Now, talk about dishonest headlines. The scientists that they were actually talking to were basically suggesting that they were talking about microbes. They weren't talking about like sapient creatures walking around. Okay, but it felt like, because again, most people don't go beyond a headline. And so I'm sure at a lot of dinner tables around the world, people were saying, oh, hey, scientists are saying space aliens may already be here, but we don't recognize them. And then somebody starts talking about ancient aliens like they know something. And then some, and it turns into a fucking mess. I read the article and I have to give some credit to the notion that they were hinting at that, like the microbes that might have started life on Earth may have actually come from Mars, which that was interesting. I mean, there's certainly ways to, directions one could go with that. Not that that's a new idea necessarily, right? We already think that we've found bacterial life from Mars, like in Antarctica, that crashed on a meteor. And that was in the 90s. But regardless, they get some scientists having some flights of fancy in this, where they're suggesting directed panspermia, meaning that like there was a, part machine, which I don't even know why they bother bringing that up, but like a half machine, or so basically a cyborg alien species is, might be seeding the universe and sending out spores, and microbes to basically, plant life on all these, on varying planets that could support it. Why even go there? I mean, that's great science fiction, what evidence do you possibly have for that sort of thing? Now, I mean, the Mars idea of panspermia and all this, I mean, certainly there's, that's not a crazy bit of speculation to get into. But the articles went way far out. Then I saw an article. Again, all of this is in the span of maybe about a week. Then I saw an article, or maybe two, which was very interesting. And this was from Nautilus, which is a little more of where, they're trying to take their time with what their stories are. And they're not just, going for news of the week, right? Or news of the hour, or news of the second. And this article intrigued me for a few reasons. And this is what I want to get into. Okay. And that is, how will our religions handle the discovery of alien life by David Weintraub? Now, again, the interesting thing here is that, or what I found interesting, is that all of these basically came up in pocket very quickly. And granted, Ancient Aliens started, season 15? And so, you got to wonder if there's just this confluence of interest because of, various media sources and algorithms that make all this come together. I'll admit, I wonder if there's a little something more to it. Now, understand my position on aliens. It has not changed in the near decade that I've been doing Sovryn Tech. I don't think that aliens from outer space have ever been to Earth. I'm a little more open to the idea of that there could have been life, say, on other planets in our or other planetoids in our solar system. Something could have happened that way, but the laws of physics as they are, and they are, no, sorry, we don't have, interstellar aliens and ETs, coming to Earth. And I don't think that they ever have. All right. So that's my position on it before somebody thinks, oh, he's talking about aliens. This must be one of those crazy shows. No. But I do think that, and while I think that sapient life, okay, not just sentient, not just animal life, not just microbes or anything like that, but sapient life like us that is conscious, okay, that can act outside of instinct. While I do think that it is exceptionally rare, the idea that we might encounter it someday, maybe. The idea that it could have cropped up maybe on Mars long ago, or other planetoids, maybe, maybe we go full on Europa report with this shit. Maybe. I am not closed off to those possibilities. Okay. Now, if we ever do discover that, hell, might even find, who knows? Maybe there's shit on the moon. Just tossing that out there. Okay. And yes, before anybody asks about that, yes, we have been to the moon. Thank you. When this happened, when, and I know I'm saying when, not even if, but we'll do the when and if. Fine. We'll be intellectually honest. When and if we discover sapient life that isn't human, the religions as they stand on planet Earth are going to run into a problem. And that is, again, kind of the main thrust of this article. And I thought it was very interesting, like I said, for a couple of reasons. And I want to break into it and have this conversation. And it will lead to future conversations coming throughout 2020 on Sovryn Tech. So here we go. How will our religions handle the discovery of alien life? Insight into what 7 religions might think if we made contact with extraterrestrial life and what they might do. Now, something I want to bring up quickly is that the use of the term extraterrestrial, I think we kind of treat that as a joke, largely because of the great movie E.T., along with, I think, Ancient Aliens certainly hasn't helped the matter. I do think that using the phrase extraterrestrial is incredibly important, though, because, and I'll explain why as we go through this, that is a term, like using the word alien. One of the things I love doing on this show is honing down language, okay, and being very specific with language if we can. And I think using the term extraterrestrial needs to stop being the butt of a joke. And it should not be looked at, even though I don't think extraterrestrials have ever been to Earth. Okay? It shouldn't be looked at with any kind of scorn or wide-eyed or surprise or laughter. Because it is a perfectly scientific term and an important one. Like I said, as we go through this, I'll explain why. But let's read the story here. What would your priest, rabbi, or imam say if we discovered alien life? For the religious, knowing that life on Earth is not unique may demand radical new ways of thinking about ourselves. How special and sacred are we? Is Earth a privileged place? Do we have an obligation to care for beings on other planets? Should we convert ET to quote-unquote my religion? These questions point to a deeper issue about whether our religions can adapt to the idea that humans are not the only sentient beings in the universe capable of worshiping God. Some faiths might unearth new meanings in ancient texts and develop ways of incorporating alien life into their worldviews. Other religions that are less flexible in their interpretations of scripture or that claim humans are the only intelligent beings in the universe might struggle to adapt. Whether we are believers or not, none of us can really fully escape the influence of religion in our culture. Stallion breaking in, that's a really key point here. And that's part of the reason I want to talk about this. Because even if you are the most ardent atheist, okay, or wherever you sit on the Dawkins scale, and I sit really close to 7, religion affects you regardless. And so this conversation is something to be had. Let's keep reading. Religion is one of the oldest parts of our social fabric and is one way, perhaps the main way, that society will process first contact. Here is a brief list of how some religions think about aliens, whether they will try to proselytize them, and which religions are likely to remain intact in the wake of the potential discovery of alien life. Now, this article starts off with Judaism, which I am ethnically Jewish. I haven't practiced Judaism, rabbinic Judaism, in a long, long time. My parents converted to Christianity, which is going to be important in this conversation a little later, basically after my bar mitzvah. So let's talk about Judaism here. So this is one that I'm very knowledgeable about regardless, even though I don't practice any of these religions. I do have a doctorate of divinity, and I am very well versed in many religions, Judaism being one of the top ones. So anyway, let's read about what they have to say here. There are a few reasons to believe that Judaism would outlast a first encounter. Since Jews believe there are no limits on the power of God, they are open to the idea that God is free to create more than one form of sentient species in the cosmos. Also, Rabbi Norman Lamb recently proposed that Judaism, quote, can very well accept a scientific finding that man is not the only intelligent and bio-spiritual resident in God's world, end quote, because, quote, man's non-singularity does not imply his insignificance, end quote. From Lamb's theological perspective, humans might not be the focal point of God's universe, but they still have a purpose. Now, I want to stop there for a second. Bio-spiritual resident. That's a new term for me. That's a different one. But let me finish up here. Jews would also not bother to proselytize E.T. 12th century Jewish philosopher Maimonides held that the righteous of all nations and faiths will earn a place in heaven. On this basis, Jews would assume that E.T. will decide for itself how and whether to worship God. So Judaism's one of the more interesting faiths to look into when it comes to extraterrestrials, because, for one, in various aspects of Talmud Torah, the notion that there are 18,000 worlds in the universe, like habitable worlds, and it's heavily implied that there's life on all of those, that's a part of Rabbinic Judaism. Okay, so Judaism basically already says that there's other life out there. If you want to accept that. I mean, the hard part with a lot of Jewish texts outside of Torah itself, which I grant you, Torah also often gets, there's a lot of different commentaries and a lot of different interpretation when it comes to that. But a lot of Judaism is, and you can laugh at this, it's fine. A lot of Judaism is just two rabbis, or more than two rabbis, arguing with each other. And you get a lot of different opinions in that, and a lot of different interpretations in that. And this read that there are 18,000 worlds out there with life on them, or that are at least habitable. I mean, take that for what you will. But no, yeah, Judaism would have no problem, surviving the discovery of other sapient life, ET or otherwise. And yes, I did say otherwise. We'll talk about that. Also, Judaism is, in fact, it's one of the religions, I think part of the, most people get conspiratorial around Judaism because, they're basically like, nobody ever attacks the Jews. Well, that's not true. Plenty of people have attacked the Jews over the years. But they'll say like, oh, in media, you never really see the Jews getting attacked. That's because the Jews run the media. No, Jews get made fun of in media plenty. But one of the reasons that it might seem to people that Judaism gets treated differently than other religions is because Judaism doesn't proselytize. In fact, Judaism almost does the opposite of proselytizing. If you want to convert to Judaism, anybody that's listening that knows how that goes, you are actively like pushed and tried to be convinced to not. Like, no, you don't want this. You don't want to be one of us. It's the funniest thing to ever experience and see. So that's different from most other religions where, yeah, they try to bring you in or they are very welcoming and all this. And with Judaism, I mean, that's just not the case. It's not to say that they're mean, but it's just not the case. Like, no, you don't need to be part of this weird ass religion, or part of these weird ass people. And I say that as a Jew myself. And so that creates no problem with, because as we go through these religions, okay, we find out that there's aliens, say like we find living ones. Okay, do we convert them? Do we tell them about the good book? For Jews, nah. Let them do whatever the fuck they want. we're going to do our thing. We got our message that pertains to us, and everybody else will do what they do, and that's the score. And I think I give Judaism credit for that, because I think anything, and I'm not saying rabbinic Judaism is the truth, okay, but anything that is remotely the truth is not something that you need a whole lot of convincing for, or you don't need the Spanish Inquisition for, right? It's not something that necessarily needs to be proselytized. It's something that people will just recognize as they encounter the information. In fact, it's something that I could get into a big conversation about this with Christianity, because it's something that's kind of anachronistic in Christianity. Because in one hand, you have where Paul, I think it's in the book of Acts, where he readily states that you don't need the Bible to recognize God's glory, because all you need to look at is what he calls the book of nature. Wiccans would be familiar with this concept as well. Basically, all you have to do is look out your window and you see God, and you should recognize a creator, right? That's what Paul is saying. And so for Christians to, for the claim to be that a person should instantly recognize God and the truth of reality just by looking out the window, just by looking at a tree, kind of stands in contrast to go out there and tell everybody about Jesus Christ, right? Like, you kind of can't have it both ways, but that's not a conversation we're here to have. So let's keep going. We'll move on from the Jews. Now, here, this is when the article grabbed me. Okay, I kind of wanted to just see what they said about Judaism and how they'd interact, and I wondered if they were going to bring up the 18,000 number in this Nautilus piece. But then the second religion that they brought up is the one that made me read the rest of it, because this is one that I am very, also, like Judaism, also very personally familiar with, and that is Seventh-day Adventism. Now, Seventh-day Adventism, some aspects of Christianity, denominations of Christianity, claim that it is not Christian, that it's a cult. As to where if you read Kingdom of the Cults, which is kind of the book about cults and also about defining Christianity for Protestantism, it's just one of the massive, massive books about it. It's had multiple editions over the decades. it's made abundantly clear in that while Mormons are a cult, and actually even Catholicism could be considered a cult, Seventh-day Adventism is not a cult. It is absolutely Christian because it, at the end of the day, relies upon sola scriptura, which is the real gauge of, for most Protestants, that is the real gauge of whether or not something is Christian. Sola scriptura means Bible only. Like the only thing that you believe is based off of the Word of God. And that is true that with Seventh-day Adventism, they do believe in sola scriptura. They have a little something extra that is basically like what they would call a magnifying glass over the Bible. But they are ultimately sola scriptura. I'm amazed that they are talked about in this article, because usually most people don't know jack shit about Seventh-day Adventists, which it is a fascinating religion to look into, because that while they are sola scriptura and they basically only run off of the Bible, they do have that something extra, which falls under the prophetess of Ellen G. White. Not Ellen Sovryn, but Ellen G. White. Not to say that Ellen Sovryn isn't a prophetess, but anyway, no. Just having fun there. Anyway, Seventh-day Adventism, let's read what this has to say here. Seventh-day Adventism emerged in the 19th century in part as a solution to theological problems stemming from the possibility of extraterrestrial life. The prophetess Ellen White described visions of extraterrestrial beings in different worlds that were, quote, tall, majestic people, end quote, and entirely without sin. These visions inform the religion's bedrock belief that since aliens are not affected by original sin, they do not need Christian redemption. Of course, a serious problem could emerge if ET turns out to be evil. In this case, White's prophecies might be seen as false, and Seventh-day Adventism would either need to find a way to adjust or vanish into history. And they actually even have a picture here of Ellen G. White. Again, I'm amazed that they even bothered to mention it. Now, this is true. So, when my parents converted out of Judaism, they became Seventh-day Adventists. And Seventh-day Adventism basically purports, like the kind of one extra thing that most Christians don't do that they do, outside of having the prophetess Ellen White, is they believe in the Sabbath. And they think that it is meant to be kept holy. Still, as to where other Christian denominations, including, Protestant and including Catholics, worship on Sunday, right? They say that that's the new Sabbath because that's the day that Jesus rose, whatever. So when I was a teenager, I was a Seventh-day Adventist, and I actually gave sermons in an SDA, as they call it, an SDA church. So I'm very familiar with this, and I've read most of Ellen G. White's works. I don't know if anybody could read all of them because there's so much, but I've read most of her works. And she certainly had plenty of visions. And there is the one where, basically she suggests that she is seeing what would be extraterrestrials. But, when I was growing up in the Adventist church, the concept of talking about aliens, because at the time I was a huge Star Trek fan, so was my dad, but like talking about ETs, that was not seen as weird or a problem at all in the church. For example, an easy thing, in fact, my dad would even point to this, I would point to it, but you have in the book of Job, in the Old Testament, you have in basically chapter 1, where there appears to be a galactic council going on, where Satan, comes and it's talking with God, and there's a bunch of people there. Like, it sounds like, almost like a meeting of the United Nations, and, Satan's joining them, or, in Judaism, we'd call him the adversary. But regardless, that gets attributed to Satan in Christianity. And this is how he wants to tempt Job and everything. Now, the book of Job, I've brought this up many times, but I'll say it again. The book of Job is very weird, because the book of Job, while it's like, for Christians, it's in the middle of the Old Testament, it's actually the oldest book we have in the Old Testament. And in fact, it doesn't fit in with the overall narrative of the Old Testament, and certainly not the New Testament. The character of Job basically never gets mentioned again. It feels, and there's other books in the Bible that are this way, where they feel kind of out of place, right? Like the book of Esther is Like, there's no prayers in it. There's no, like, it's just this strange book out of nowhere. In fact, the Catholics would add chapters to it to try and make it fit better into Christian theology. Yeah, Job is one of those books where basically if somebody came to me and said, yeah, that's actually not like not meant to be a Hebrew text. That's from a different religion. That's from a different, tradition. I'd totally believe them, because it just doesn't really seem to fit. So I'll be fair on that and expressing that. But that is one of the things that gets brought up as, well, this sounds like is God talking to angels? Does he have a council of angels like that? Or are these a bunch of people from a bunch of different worlds? What the fuck is this scene happening in the beginning of the book of Job? But it does suggest ETs, right? And I'm not going to get into the Von Daniken thing. Well, Jesus is technically an ET, and this is technically no Christian's going to run with that. At least they shouldn't. But in the New Testament itself, that alone, okay, we don't even need to get into the Old Testament. In the New Testament itself, particularly if you read, so something to understand about Seventh-day Adventists as well. The reason I feel confident in saying they're sola scriptura, it's because they are, but it's because I've yet, and as a doctor of divinity, I've yet to experience another group, denomination of Christians that know the Bible overall and dig as deep into the Bible as well as Seventh-day Adventists. I mean, they are so fucking hardcore about it. And they get into the arguments of like, oh, are we translating this accurately? I mean, they get into all of that. I mean, it feels like every one of them is a goddamn scholar. And like, really, and in fact, they love to reference the Bereans, right, who are in the New Testament, and Paul applauds the Bereans because everything that Paul said, the Bereans would go back to Torah and they'd look at it and they say, wait, does this add up? Oh, okay, yep, all right, and they check all the boxes to see if what he was saying was true. The Adventists are very much that way, and while some of this you can get in the King James Version of the Bible as well, and I know there's plenty of Christian denominations that are just like, we only believe in the King James Bible, blah, 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 which I guess the rest of the world outside of America and Britain's screwed, because they don't speak English, but okay. Anyway, we're not going to go down there. Those are arguments from really unintelligent people. There is one of the favorites versions of the Bible that Adventists like to use is the American Standard Version. Now, this is also the favorite Bible of Jehovah's Witnesses, okay, which is definitely a cult. But I mean, every religion is, but regardless, okay. I know this is a big one, and it's because of the use of Jehovah and everything within it. For every time that the Tetragrammaton or like Elohim or something like that would come up, they would put in, Jehovah. So the Jehovah's Witnesses love this version, but the American Standard Version, if you look at it from a scholarly perspective, I know that sounds like an oxymoron when it comes to the Bible, but let's keep running with it. From a scholarly perspective, it is the most literal translation, just about, minus like maybe Young's literal translation from the 19th century, the YLT. It's about the most literal translation you can get of the text into English. Okay? And we're not going to get into the conversation of, well, but are they using the closest to the autographs when they translated to the American Standard Version, blah, blah, blah. I think there's a lot of great arguments for the American Standard Version. Of course, what do I think the best version of the Bible in the English language is? It's actually the Dewey Reams Bible from the Catholics, in my opinion, because it's based off of the Vulgate, which is based off of the closest text to the autographs, in my opinion. But regardless, in what's commonly out there, and there's the New American Standard Bible too, which is basically trying to do what the ASV did, the American Standard Version was doing, but just updating it. And there's even two versions of that. There's the 77 version, and then there's the 95 version. So believe me, you don't know what it's like to have to grow up with all this crap. But regardless, the American Standard Version is widely considered, even in scholarly circles, to be about the, one of the top translations anyway, and most literal in the English language. Certainly much better than the NIV, ESV, or anything like that. So with the American Standard Version, in the New Testament alone, you have 3 instances across 2 books that uses the very specific term of worlds. Okay, the plural of worlds. You have the first one, which is in 1 Corinthians, and all of this is written by Paul, okay, which most of the New Testament is. But there's 1 Corinthians chapter 2, verse 7, which says, "But we speak God's wisdom in a mystery, even the wisdom that hath been hidden, which God foreordained before the worlds unto our glory." So there's a reference of the worlds and the glory of God, which there's an argument around how do you, what is the glory of God? How do you express the glory of God? That comes through worship. And so that there are other worlds out there, and those other worlds, kind of like Ellen White suggested, is that they exist without sin. Okay, but there is alien life, and they wouldn't want to come anywhere near us. In fact, that notion, when I was a Christian, that's how I handled the ET question. Was, yeah, there's probably life out there, but they're without sin. They don't even want to know what we'd look like, because the idea of sin is so anathema to existence, to creation, that they're not interested. So UFOs, bullshit. It's either demonic or it's a government program. It's not aliens. Okay, that was my running thought process when I was a Christian, and a lot of that comes from what I learned within, the interpretation within Adventism. Okay, is that, oh yes, there absolutely is life on other worlds. But again, it is without sin. It did not experience the fall. And so when we think, so for Adventists also, whenever they hear about a UFO, they don't think it's an alien, right? They either think it's demonic or they think that it's, just like a government spy plane or something like that. So there's that. Then in the book of Hebrews in the New Testament, you have chapter 1, verse 2, hath at the end of these days spoken unto us in his Son, of course that's Jesus, whom he appointed heir of all things, through whom also he made the worlds. So there's again that mention of worlds, and this creation is in referencing life. Okay, now go to same book, Hebrews, go to chapter 11, verse 3. By faith we understand that the worlds have been framed by the word of God, so that what is seen hath not been made out of things which appear. So I bring all of that up. I read those to suggest that the idea that Jesus, that God is God of, King of Kings and Lord of Lords, not just of earth or, over humans, but also that there is life on other planets. There is reference that there are other planets. And nobody at the time, there's no real suggestion that when Paul was writing about worlds, that somehow he was writing about Mars, or that he was writing about, Uranus or Venus or something like that. Maybe, but there's no real suggestion there. He is hinting at, when he's talking about worlds, he is talking about other places, or it seems pretty clear that he is talking, very much implied, that he's talking about places where there is life. Okay? So, yeah, the idea that the Bible is referencing that Jesus is king over other worlds, what is he the king over? Just, a rock? Why even mention it if it's just a rock? That doesn't even make sense. So I would argue that Christianity, that the Bible, the New Testament, does Adventism or not, does ultimately point at the idea that there's alien life out there. However, there's no record of it having gone through a fall or experienced, original sin or any of those concepts. So the idea that ETs are, piloting the UFOs that people claim they see, no. The Bible would suggest the opposite. But regardless, let's go to the next religion here. And the next one, this is weird. He labels it creationists, not Christians, but creationists. Let's do it. Most fundamentalist Christians are committed to a literal interpretation of Scripture. Since there is no mention of extraterrestrials in the Bible, again, Stallion breaking in, I think he's inaccurate about that. I think Job, the book of Job, points at mentions of extraterrestrials. And also I think that Corinthians and Hebrews, both 1 Corinthians and the book of Hebrews, are all hinting at extraterrestrials. Let's keep going. They conclude that this proves the absence of any such beings in the universe. For this reason, first contact with an alien would obviously generate a major headache for creationists. Creationists deny the theory of evolution, and the discovery of simple or intelligent life on other planets probably won't cause them to reconsider its validity. Perhaps they would embrace the idea that an all-powerful God created more than one intelligent species in the universe without resort to evolution, and simply chose not to tell us about this aspect of God's plans. But this view depends upon a non-literal interpretation of Scripture. If ET lands on Earth, denying its existence will become virtually impossible. For creationism to remain viable, its followers will need to accept divergent views on a wide range of scriptural matters. Now, it's important to bring up, in fact, bringing up Adventists is kind of helpful for this, because Seventh-day Adventism came out of the Millerite movement, which was from a guy, John Miller, and this was a huge deal in the 19th century in the United States. He thought the world was going to end like in 1844. Okay? Had to do with the Leonid meteor shower. It's a big conversation to get into. What happened during that time is that people were literally giving up their earthly existence, and they were just like traversing, like nomads across the United States, trying to save as many people they could before what they thought was going to be the date of the second coming of Christ. Even though the Bible does say, not the day or the hour, well, whatever. They felt that they had a pretty good damn idea. In so doing, they doubled down on studying Scripture. And the argument goes is that Seventh-day Adventism came out of the Millerite movement because so many truths were discovered or rediscovered. For example, like, hey, we should be worshiping on Saturday, not on Sunday. There's no biblical, edict to worship on Sunday, and there isn't. There's none. There's nowhere in the Bible that says you should be worshiping on Sunday. Okay, other than if you want to, now in 2 Timothy, there is the call to follow the scriptures and the traditions, which is a very important point we'll get into when we talk about Catholics here, to follow the traditions, okay, basically of the church. And that's where Catholicism's power comes from in Scripture, is that traditions. They are the carriers of that tradition. So you could say that worshiping on Sunday is a tradition that got carried down, fine, but that's not sola scriptura, is it? Traditions, in fact, that's kind of a major problem with the concept of sola scriptura, is that the Bible itself suggests that sola scriptura is not a biblical concept, ironically, because it says there are traditions that exist outside of it. So you run into that, okay? But my point being is that a lot of Christian denominations that have been around for even a few hundred years, okay, ever since the Protestant Reformation, they stuck with a lot of, they didn't veer too far off from Catholicism, right? And arguably, I think the historical argument can easily be made that the bulk of religions, or the bulk of Protestant denominations, they were power grabs. They weren't actually like trying to get to any truth. They were power grabs. I think that the Millerite movement was genuinely trying to get to some truth. It was the opposite of a power grab because people were just selling everything they fucking had. They were leaving their homes, they were nomads. They were, I think, about as if I love the Gandhi saying of I like your Christ, but I don't like your Christians because they're nothing like your Christ. I think the Millerite movement, between them and the original Waldensians, that's about the closest you've ever gotten to Christians acting like Christ, in my opinion. So I don't think it was a power grab, and I don't think the Seventh-day Adventist Church, it might have later on, maybe arguments could be made that there were power grabs involved. Certainly with Mormons, there were power grabs. Joe Smith was running for the presidency of the United States. Give me a break. Anyway, I think that they were rediscovering literal interpretations of Scripture, and in that they were discovered. I'm not going to say Ellen White had any visions. In fact, arguably, you can explain a lot of medically a lot of her condition, and why she might have had those visions. She was epileptic. There's all anyway. That's a whole other story. But the interpretation that there are worlds out there, that God is God over, that he's Lord over of, because there is life there. Yeah, I think that's in the Bible. So I think if the bulk of Protestants are going to have an issue with alien life coming, that's on them. They don't understand their own book, in my opinion. So anyway, let's go on to Roman Catholicism, and we'll keep this rolling. Many Roman Catholic leaders take the possible existence of aliens seriously, and they tend to agree that ET is sinful. Ooh. Yet they disagree on why ET is sinful and whether he should attend Roman Catholic Mass if he lands on Earth. So real quick on this, I believe it was Pope Benedict XVI who basically came out and said that it's entirely possible that there is extraterrestrial life, sapient life out there. And that was like in 2009, 2010, something like that. So, the Holy See is totally on board with that. So with Catholicism, there's no problem. There's no problem at all. Do they want to have them attend Mass? Well, that is an interesting question. Let's keep going. In the first half of the 20th century, Jesuit priest Pierre Teilhard de Chardin suggested that original sin didn't arise from the errors of two humans on Earth, but instead permeates the entire universe. He also suggested that Christ on Earth offers no redemptive value for any other beings anywhere else in the cosmos, and so aliens visiting Earth would not benefit from embracing Christianity. But Teilhard believed that Christ could become incarnate on different worlds in forms appropriate for those places and beings. These other saviors could establish Christian-like local belief systems that provide opportunities for the redemption and salvation of those alien populations. Now, I want to stop for a second. We talked about, I think we were having the conversation around AI maybe 3 or 4 episodes ago. And we're in episode 365 of Sovereign Tech here. We talked about Teilhard, actually. And I think this guy is a much bigger philosophical influence than anyone gives him credit for. His works were buried by the Catholic Church itself, even though he was a Jesuit priest. I think he wrote, was it The Persistence of Man or The Progression of Man was his kind of his major work, though he wrote many others. And we talked about it because he's the guy that theorized what's called the Omega point, which is the idea that all of creation is effectively going into Christ. All of the universe, every ounce of energy in the universe is at some point going to come together into one point, that being Christ. And he calls that the Omega point, right? I am the Alpha and the Omega. And there are people who take Teilhard's theories and point them at why we are going to end up in like a transhumanist future where all of our consciousness are interconnected into one brain and blah, blah, blah. This guy has a lot of influence. In fact, this very notion of what they were just laying out, this reminds me of in season 2 of the original series of Star Trek, you have the episode Bread and Circuses, where, spoiler alert, even though it came out in the 60s, where you find out that like they go to this planet that is like a doppelganger Earth, and there's even like a Roman Empire there. And they have this bullshit theory about, parallel development of planets. Anyway, it's made up for the show, but it's a fine story idea. And there they keep talking about worshiping the sun, and everybody thinks they're pagans. Everybody in Starfleet thinks they're pagans. But Uhura finds out at the end that they meant the Son of Man, or they meant the Son of God. And so they're talking about that they were experiencing Christ. And that's exactly what Teilhard's getting at here, is the idea that Christ would, sin is everywhere in creation. Like the entire universe is tainted, which is why it all has to come to this Omega point at some point. It all has to come back into Christ. And so on other planets where there's other life, which Teilhard would have no problem with, and again, I would argue the Bible doesn't, even under Catholicism, that they would have an experience with a savior as well, with a Christ-like figure, okay? Which, again, is ultimately all about leading them to an Omega point. All right. Now, this idea of an Omega point, like, that's not crazy for it to be injected into Christianity, because the idea that, so like with the Greeks, okay, in fact, we got into this on our most recent Zomi 1 Underground Q&A, which if you want to join that, go to zomi1.com, look on the right-hand sign. You can sign for $2 a month. You can sign up for it and you get your hookup. The Greeks, particularly the Stoics, which was arguably the most popular philosophy through ancient Greece, the Stoics believed that everything, they believed in, amor fati, right? Love, fate. That fate was intrinsic to the universe, that everything was going towards the good, which is why you loved fate, okay, and you dealt with all the bad shit that happened to you, you're just like, yeah, whatever. Now, I mean, I'm not a Stoic. I don't agree with Stoicism at all. I can easily debunk it as practical nonsense. But regardless, this is what they believe, that everything is going, even the bad things that happen to you are ultimately heading towards a good point. And that's really where Teilhard is coming from, and if he had a biblical concept, if he wants to argue that it is a biblical concept, the idea that this amor fati, or, the idea of fate, that everything's part of God's plan, that would come from ancient Greece, and would even be, I would argue that the colloquial language, even like Koine Greek, which is what the bulk of the New Testament is in, it would be in there, even in the kind of the unconscious thought process of the language itself. So I don't think Teilhard is necessarily off in him thinking that way, that the Bible would suggest that, or that Christianity more particularly would suggest that. But I mean, I think that the concept of the laws of thermodynamics, I think, stand against the omega point. I think it's ridiculous, but that's just me. But I'm saying I get where he's coming from. But he has no problem with that. But Catholicism thinking that salvation needs to happen everywhere in the universe, but the specific salvation that's happening on Earth, according to Teilhard, would suggest that if E.T. came here, he doesn't have to get saved, because he needs to get saved on his homeworld, right? Anyway, let's read a little bit more. Teilhard's writings have never become mainstream and have been suppressed since 1962. In contrast, the ideas of Brother Guy Consolmano, I think is his name, Consolmano, a professional astronomer and a Jesuit who works for the Vatican Observatory, better reflect current Roman Catholic views on E.T. Consolmano believes that finding E.T. would not pose a problem for Roman Catholicism. He argues that there is only one Christ, the one who lived and died and was resurrected on Earth 2,000 years ago. If other beings in the universe suffer from original sin, then they will benefit from the life and resurrection of Christ on Earth. This theological approach also makes Roman Catholicism a universal religion and Earth the most important place in the universe. If Consolmano's views continue to be popular, Roman Catholic leaders might be compelled to convert E.T. at the first opportunity. This may also cause the minority members who agree with Teilhard to separate from the church. And of course that makes sense. I mean, and it's not like there haven't been separations within Catholicism itself, right? You have the Sedevacantists, who basically think that anything from the Second Vatican Council, anything after that, or anything from it and afterwards is bullshit. It's of Satan. Okay. So that, Teilhard would go off and kind of create his own, he's long dead, but that his followers, or people who follow his line of thinking, would create a separate religion. Of course, I don't see any reason that wouldn't happen. I think Catholicism would, you got to understand this. Catholicism in so many ways is the ultimate religion. I mean, it's a brilliant religion. I am not a Catholic. I am not a Christian, okay, at all. But it's a brilliant religion in that it has that authority that comes from what I mentioned earlier in Timothy, where it says the traditions. Basically, Catholicism is still here because it can make it up as it goes along. And so if extraterrestrials show up one day, no, there's no reason that Catholicism is going to fall apart. It'll just adapt. Just like in the 90s when Pope John Paul II said, there's no, evolution. Sure. Like that doesn't have to contradict what the church teaches. I remember and I was an Adventist at the time, and the Adventist church was flipping the fuck out. Of course, the Adventist church thinks that the Pope is basically the Antichrist, whoever it ends up being at the time that it happens, that judgment occurs, or is about to occur. But yeah, I mean, they thought that creationists, like kind of like this article mentions them as, think that that's insane, but yeah, Catholicism will have no problem with this. It'll adapt. It'll move on. Are they going to want to sprinkle some holy water on ET? Yeah, probably, but it will move on. Let's go on to, let's hit up Islam. Boy, this episode's running long, but that's fine. We only have a couple religions left to go. I will say, I'm not going to read the Islam thing. I don't think Islam's going to have a problem with this either, because I think Islam actually, you know what? Let's do it. Let's read the part on Islam. Those of the Muslim faith might not be surprised by news of ET's existence, particularly if ET is sentient. In fact, Islamic scripture seems to make the case that intelligent life forms exist on many other worlds. To make the case that intelligent life forms exist on, or let's see, the Quran states that all the beings in the universe serve Allah, who, quote, does take an account of them all and hath numbered them all exactly, and every one of them will come to him singly on the day of judgment, end quote. A number of scholars agree that these beings are not angels because the word dabba translates to mean a living, breathing creature that walks on the ground. It does not fly, and it is not a spirit. Many Muslims believe that Islam forbids proselytizing, but several Islamic groups think the testimony of faith for Muslims, quote, there is no true God but Allah, and Muhammad is the prophet of God, end quote, implies that those who are not Muslims threaten their faith, and so non-Muslims must be converted. On this basis, we can expect that numerous Muslims will wish to convert ET to Islam. I mean, the best case scenario is that if extraterrestrials actually came to Earth, that maybe Muslims would change their mind and they'd become a religion that does not proselytize. Okay. Understand, and there's debate even within Islam about this, but you have in Islam already accepts that there is other life, sapient life on Earth, right? There's the jinn, right? And the jinn are like these, kind of like smoky creatures. I mean, it's very weird how they're described. But Islam has no problem suggesting, and they're not demons either, Islam has no problem suggesting that there is already other intelligent life on Earth. And this gets into part of the conversation, okay, where I think it's important to use the term extraterrestrials, okay? Because what if, there were aliens that, or we call them aliens. What if there were other sapient life forms already on Earth, not microbes, but something that co-evolved and you just don't know it's here. You just don't know that they're here. Now, there's two terms that follow the terrestrial nomenclature that I want to discuss. One is what are often called ultra-terrestrials, though there's other terms for them. And that is the idea that there are life forms on Earth that exist in other dimensions, but on Earth. Okay, same plane, P-L-A-I-N, but different plane of existence, P-L-A-N-E, right? So you have the concept of ultra-terrestrials, which is an interesting one, and very hard to say, well, how do you go about disproving that necessarily? So you have ultra-terrestrials. Then the other one is not originally from this person, but he certainly wrote one of the more interesting books on the subject. And that is Mac Tunney's. He wrote a book called Crypto-Terrestrials, which is a fascinating read. And actually, Mac Tunney's was a hell of a science fiction writer. And I mean that. And a loss, too. He died at like age 30, 34, or something like that, just a few years ago. Was it 2005? Something like that. Anyway, I actually met him at a convention. Mac Tunney's wrote this book. It came out posthumously, but he wrote a book called Crypto-Terrestrials. And his whole premise in the book, it's a nonfiction book. I mean, you might think it's fiction, but it's a nonfiction book, where he is suggesting that actually the bulk of the evidence that we have for extraterrestrials, if you just twist it to where, no, they're already on Earth and they're just, engaging in operations on Earth that they're already there, like that actually fits the evidence, say with UFOs and whatever else, far better than the idea of extraterrestrials. And this is why I think the term extraterrestrials needs to come back into vogue. Okay? Because there are other concepts of other sapient life that I think get ignored when all we do is either A, laugh at the idea of other sapient life, which bringing up the term ET often does, or when we just think it can only come from outer space. Again, Islam has no problem thinking, again, there's the jinn. They think, yeah, sure. No, and I know there's some denominations of Islam or trains of thought in Islam that the jinn are kind of I don't know, the interpretation of them isn't so literal, I guess. But Islam has no problem thinking that there's already like what you could call alien life on Earth. Okay, for example, the jinn. And I know this has been in episodes of Ancient Aliens, but fuck that show. Okay, for a million reasons. It's such a train wreck and does more harm than good. But regardless, so yeah, I don't think Islam would really have a problem. Would they try and convert the aliens? Well, again, I would hope that maybe it would be a moment for some reflection and perhaps some reinterpretation, or maybe they would think that they're the jinn. Maybe that's how they would interpret them as. It's an interesting concept. But now the last religion on this list is Buddhism. And their conclusion is, I mean, the link is in the show notes. You can check it out for yourself. I think Buddhism is I am not a fan. I'll try and be nice about it. I am not a fan of Buddhism. There you go. The idea is that Buddhists really wouldn't have a problem with alien life. Sure. Okay. Great. Let's move on. I really couldn't care less what they think. Anyway, and if they're doing it right, they shouldn't give a shit about what I think either. So, so we don't need to go there. But this idea that we're only looking for quote unquote alien life in the stars, I think is a failure. I am not saying that I have any kind of knowledge or that I believe or whatever that there is quote unquote alien. I mean, and look, it's not really alien, right? If it also co-evolved on Earth. I am a major proponent. We've talked about it many times on the show. One of my biggest issues, and this kind of hints at like these hyper-personalized drugs that we were talking about earlier and why I think they're going to be a fail. I think that the scientific term of Homo sapiens sapiens does a grave injustice and a harm to many aspects of what is the broader humanity. Okay. Because I think that there are already, and Western science just doesn't want to really recognize it, or maybe it's only just starting to, or Western medicine, I guess science and medicine, recognize that there are different types of human beings. I mean, and we've known historically that there have been Denisovans, right? Neanderthals and so on. I think that that's still the case. And I don't know, I dare say this article is missing the point. Because I think most of these religions either already believe that there is extraterrestrial life, or they would very easily adapt to it. Okay, that there's extraterrestrial life. The harder part of this conversation, and the real question, in my opinion, what if there's already other life on Earth? I mean, I get it why creationists don't want to accept that, evolution is a thing, because then they would have to accept that there are actually, well, wait, are Neanderthals saved by Christ? Did he die for their sins too? No, instead they want to just say that they're bullshit. And sometimes they bring up good points where like a certain hominid species is basically based off of one tooth and a jawbone, and you find out that it was like the tooth of a pig or something like that, right? So sometimes when the creationists call bullshit, they're actually on point, but that doesn't mean that they're right either overall. So the idea, though, that there's other sapient life already on Earth, that's the one we're already seeing where religions don't accept that, right? Like they don't accept Neanderthal. They don't accept, maybe Denisovans or whatever, no matter how strong the evidence, even the genetic evidence, right? And I mean, we already have that issue. Like Mormons don't accept DNA evidence and all that, right? Because it fucks with their story in the Book of Mormon. In fact, that's interesting too, is that I'm surprised Mormons weren't listed in this article, because Mormons, ironically, also, I don't think would have a problem with, I mean, they have a problem with DNA, but they wouldn't have a problem with alien life because, right, they have Kolob and everything, Well of Souls, and they already think that there's intergalactic travel going on. So that's not outlandish for them at all. And I mean, maybe you just don't know where to start when you start talking about, the cosmology of Mormonism. Okay, and I could kind of understand that and why a writer would want to steer clear, because that's a very complex conversation, that I'm very familiar with as well, that, oh boy. But regardless, I mean, and this is my issue here, is that the concept of cryptoterrestrials, meaning other sapient life forms on planet Earth right now that co-evolved with us. I mean, maybe there's other possibilities, but whatever, they are inhabiting the Earth. Indigenous or otherwise, they are inhabiting the Earth and have been for a while. this notion of crypto-terrestrials, that seems to me to be such a massive blind spot on the part of certainly religious people, not all. Islam, again, they have the jinn. Religious people. I mean, and Judaism wouldn't have a problem with crypto-terrestrials. Christians, I think, would. A lot of Christian faiths would have a real problem with that. And it would raise some major... There'd be some red flags even coming up in Catholicism, even though, like I said, they can change the rules as they go, have a third Vatican Council and everything will be fine. Christians, I think, would run into an issue with this. But I think it's a major, major blind spot, this concept of crypto-terrestrials on the part of religious people, on the part of non-religious people, on the part of scientists. In fact, I think the notion is so far out, but so plausible, based upon, because the same people that would easily accept that UFOs are, ETs, if you said to them, well, what about crypto-terrestrials? I think you could see, bring out the emoji with the volcano exploding out of the top of their head, and the confetti going everywhere. Like, I think that would blow their mind. And they wouldn't even take a second to consider it. Now, I mean, you don't have to accept like the hollow earth theory. It doesn't necessarily have to be the Vril, and they're coming out of these holes in Antarctica or anything along these lines. But, both crypto-terrestrials and also, as I mentioned, ultra-terrestrials, these are two concepts that are not explored or discussed enough. And they play far better within the rules of science, the laws of physics as we understand them. And it is widely ignored. Does one want to get conspiratorial about that? I wouldn't blame you if you did. But this conversation about, life's are, maybe aliens. It's funny because when I see these articles that say aliens are already on Earth, of course, again, it's just scientists talking about microbes. I'm like, are they actually going to talk about ultra-terrestrials? No, they won't even fancy the narrative. And that's the real problem here with all of these stories. I mean, the show Ancient Aliens, like I said, it does more harm than good. At least that has toyed with the idea of ultra-terrestrials. And I think it's even toyed with the idea that they're like the Vril, they're like, or, they would point at that, or the idea of crypto-terrestrials and so on, even if they don't mention Mac Tunney's, or whatever, or anyone else who's done that kind of work. They'd have guys on there who I know have written books about this sort of thing, like Nick Redfern. He's written Bloodline of the Gods. A lot of this other stuff, which also points at that actually there are multiple types of humanity on Earth, and some of those are influenced by another form of life. Anyway, that's getting into wild areas of speculation with some interesting evidence that points in that direction, but it's not. Well, it's tough to even call it evidence, right? But this is more the direction that I think people would do well to think, okay, when you run into the realm of the unexplained, as it were. Instead of, yes, we are going to the stars. We are going to outer space. I am so on board with this. Are we going to encounter life out there? Probably. But I think overall, either from a solar system perspective or even an Earth perspective, imagining sapient life much closer to home is a direction to really prepare for, to consider, and to look at, more so than where's ET coming from? Where's ETs? Where's blah, blah, blah? Where's this coming from Proxima B and all this shit? I think we do ourselves a disservice, and we are blind when we don't consider these other possibilities. And those are the ones, boy, and like I said with this article, if there's actually a real challenge for religions, that's the real challenge. What do you do when there's actually been other sapient life here this whole time? That's it for this episode of Sovryn Tech. I'm going to end it on that. We'll wrap it up, and I will see all of you on the other side.
Thank you for listening to Sovryn Tech, an Osiris One production. Now go out there and make some trouble.